Well, welcome back, everyone. If you're still finishing that last cup of coffee, now's the time to make yourselves comfortable. And usual rules apply. Try and be considerate and move up at least one space so there's a nice gap on the end for the latecomers, of whom I suspect there will be several. Also, if you've decided to sit at the far end for reasons of anti-sociability, that's fine. That's a good thing. We encourage that. But if you do want to move in to get a better view, absolutely feel free. Because this next panel really speaks to everything we've heard in the last couple of days. If there's been a big ghost, a spectre looming over the feast, it's been the duopoly of Google and Facebook, and to those we could add other social media giants, particularly in China and Asian markets. But how do modern media brands survive and thrive in the era of Facebook and Google? What happens to advertising? Where are the advertising dollars going? I think we may know that. And how do we cope with its consequences? So as a few more people are just joining, we'll delay for just a few seconds, and then I'll invite our panel to the stage. The usual FIPP Congress, massively enthusiastic, post-coffee break, rapturous applause. Please, not yet. No, it's very simple. I say the name, you applaud like there's no tomorrow. That's the way it works. Are we ready? Yeah. Good. Please welcome the President and Chief Executive of Hearst magazines in the UK, James Wildman.
Where will you have me?
Just there, please, would be great.
Thank you.
And you know her from yesterday, the Chairman of Advertising Sales and Client Partnerships at NBC Universal, Linda Yaccarino. And finally, from earlier today, one of the best beards at the conference, and that's quite an achievement given the competition, the Chief Strategy Officer at Somo UK, Ross Sleight.
Good morning. You ready for our show?
Of course not.
No.
Absolutely not.
We'll figure it out.
So we know the topic. We would love your interaction. We, of course, have spoken before about how this panel works, but the aim is to have a free-flowing discussion. So we'll cover a few topics first, and then feel free, if you wish, to raise your hand, and we'll get you as involved as we can. So thank you to all of you for taking part. This is always a horrible experience because, I've given you an idea of what I'm going to ask, but frankly, I could do anything. Who knows what might happen.
Go crazy.
And the topic, though, is one that concerns all of us. I was having a conversation a moment ago with my former boss, in fact, in conventional publishing, and like most media companies, adapting. And when old people get together, we talk about the time before the duopoly when advertising budgets were enormous and we had all of them. And I wouldn't say it was easy, but it was certainly, you knew where you stood. And everything is now changing. And I wanted to come to you and perhaps start the discussion by just asking you, in your own business, the Facebook and Google thing, to say it's caused huge shifts is an understatement. I mean, the whole world has turned upside down. And what does that mean for publishers, for the brands, for agencies, and I guess speaking from your own experience. I mean, James, if I start with you, has it changed your world? How is it changing, and what do you see coming up?
Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Well, it has, of course, changed everything. Disruption is total for all media markets, and it's not limited to the magazine markets. It's true of news brands and increasingly now television, particularly in the UK, where some chill winds are starting to blow for the first time. What it simply means, though, is that I do think that it's slightly overstated, all this concern and issues. Clearly, there are structural challenges within our business. We are selling fewer magazines year on year, but we still sell nearly 5 million a month. This is Hearst in the UK. So that's, we have opportunities to engage with audiences in a way that those platforms can't. So whilst our revenues are under pressure, our traditional advertising revenues are definitely under pressure, there are still big budgets to play for. And we just need to do different. We need to adapt, we need to innovate. We need to innovate both on product, but we also need to innovate on approach and sales, because the world is shifting towards more reach, less about context, etc. And there's an awful lot to say about all of this, but I wouldn't say it's all doom and gloom. And I think that the innovation that's coming from our business, for example, and this isn't limited to Hearst, it's across the industry, I know, is really actually very exciting. It's about digital acceleration, because we you know, Facebook and Google are made out to be these monsters that are going to kill us. I mean, actually, we see them as much as partners as competitors, because without their distribution platforms, we wouldn't have anything like the exciting digital future that I know that we do have. And outside of that, we've also got revenue diversification opportunities, which just means leveraging these wonderful brands we're privileged to work with in slightly different ways than perhaps we have traditionally. So I don't think, you know, I sit here feeling very optimistic about the future, albeit against that backdrop of some fairly significant structural challenges that are mainly built around the duopoly of Google and Facebook.
So to an extent, I can get sort of premium magazine brands, and you have plenty of those.
We do.
If you like, were the most buoyant and the best equipped to survive as reach is commoditized. But are you saying that there really hasn't been any effect yet, or have you actually seen?
No, there's huge effect. Our volumes are down, our sales are down, etc. But what I absolutely do believe is that magazines as a medium are so distinctive and differentiated, and increasingly I think, and I'm not complacent about this, I don't believe that the pendulum's ever going to swing back fully to the glory days that you referred to in your opening, but I do believe that as an antidote to an increasingly screen-based, you know, media experience, magazines are going to be seen as ever more valuable. And whilst they might become more scarce, as in fewer of them being bought and consumed, I do believe that the advertisers, particularly those branded advertisers that will increasingly see the danger associated with this pursuit of short-term return, will come back ever more and, you know, pay premiums for an engaged and trusted audience.
And I think we'll come back to those dangers in a moment, because I really do want to get to that business about brand safety and editorial environment, which we all lost sight of for a while in the rush to commoditize. But Linda, your take on this, because we heard from you yesterday to some extent on this topic. How has the world changed, and what are you doing about it, and what are you seeing that publishers ought to be doing about it?
Well, I think, you know, specifically how the world has changed, particularly with Google and Facebook accelerating the change of consumer behavior. So the way the consumer interacts or spends time with, whether it's a magazine or a piece of television content, whether it's sports or news or entertainment, that's really what's changed so dramatically. And I think it's made us, and I'll talk on behalf primarily of a TV content developer, a premium content developer, and that's actually what we have in common, right? And I think that's actually the strongest ammunition that we have, because, you know, you mentioned something very interesting, that you talk about the commoditization of reach. And I think what's really started to emerge is a conversation about the effectiveness of that reach, the actual verification of that reach from the Facebooks or the Googles, but it's actually on the backs of the premium content providers, okay? Whether it is a magazine publisher or a television content publisher. And that being said, what's changed is how we're approaching that. And we talk a lot about our conversations at our company about screen agnostic, platform specific. So our content is made very specifically. If we're distributing out for social, it looks very specifically, whether it's Snapchat or whether it's very specifically developed for YouTube. So we do that solely to resonate more with the consumer. But quite frankly, I think, you know, we look at Google or YouTube and Facebook as partners, one much better than the other, who is willing to partner much more with premium content.
Just for clarity, which is which?
YouTube, we figured out a nice way to work with. Facebook, we're still trying to figure that out. They've been much more difficult to develop partnerships in this space. So we're optimistic that one day we are going to crack the code.
So you're both sharing the idea that premium content is the sort of essential differentiator to get away from the idea of commoditized brands.
Absolutely, and particularly as it relates to how valuable it is to a marketer, okay? There's only so much an algorithm can decide. So you have to go beyond the algorithm, and the only way it works is via premium content, and that's what we both decide, because there's only so many YouTube videos with cats on skateboards that are going to make sense to the consumer, but certainly makes no sense for an advertiser to put their brand.
And that perhaps puts the onus on owners of premium media producing premium content to perhaps make that case a bit better in terms of, is that research, is that putting out stats to rival the very detailed data you can get from Google and Facebook, and saying, well, yeah, that's great, but that's just data. It's not information, and it's certainly not insight.
It's very important to note, it is their own data.
Exactly.
So it needs to be verified, it needs to be established as real and true, and actually, it needs to be verified to if it's really effective. Because if NBC Universal, the largest media company in the US, could distribute our own data that told our clients how we felt we performed, I suspect it would look a lot different than what our currency trader or Nielsen says how we're performing in the US.
Absolutely. It's the modern equivalent of a publisher's statement, which we always never quite trusted in terms of circulation.
Right.
We relied on external auditors to verify what was happening.
And I joke a little, and I'm sarcastic a little bit, but it is astounding the imbalance, or the false equivalency that has risen up through those tech platforms that the marketers have been forced to accept.
Okay. Ross, you spoke to us just a few minutes ago, in fact, about these changes in the way people are consuming media. You concentrated on mobile, and it was quite radical. You know, the number of hours you were mentioning that people are spending on mobile devices means that there clearly has been a shift, a massive shift in the way people behave. What does that mean, and where does Facebook and Google fit into all of that? Do we live with their dominance, or is this a trend that will pass?
So one of the things that I'm very conscious of is that we describe advertising as a homogeneous whole, and it's not. Across a customer's journey from awareness, consideration, research, transaction, service, loyalty, advocacy, right? That long customer journey that you go on, which is not linear, but up and down and roundabouts and everything. There are different ways we want to be able to influence behavior, and we call that marketing and whatever it will be. And let's be clear, the point of, last click to transaction, I mean, that performance area has, way before mobile was sorted, right? Google and other players in that field have the behavioral intent. So already agencies and brands are reliant on that behavioral intent to be able to do that part. And the question I've got is, as Google and Facebook start to move further into the upwards chain, into the research, consideration, the awareness play, which is basically where they're playing today, is in awareness for reach. And be quite clear that I think reach is cheap and simple and easy to get across multiple different screens, TV, whatever it might well be. Reach is not the point here. It's about engagement and changing people's behavior. They're running into a lot of issues. The problem is that as soon as you simplify the massively fragmented space for marketers out there and say, here's one place you can go to in order to be able to get purchase intent or to get performance, that helps marketers, because the intermediaries in those spaces, which were originally agencies which helped you navigate to find the right audiences with the right message, have less of a role now, because, and I firmly see that, that for marketers in the short term, Facebook and Google is a good thing because it simplifies things down. And it also helps them to shift and diversify their spend into digital away from traditional channels. Speaking as a digital person, I like that, But in effect, where they're going to struggle and where the opportunities are in other areas of the customer journey in marketing. And if you take awareness out, just reach and awareness out of that, consideration and research, that's where that part of the customer journey is open to complete play at the moment. And that's where I think that publishers have got an opportunity to really take that engagement they have through their properties and get much more direct with clients around that.
And that's really interesting, because that's something we've seen yesterday at this conference, but also at previous Digital Innovators Summits and at previous iterations of this event, is publishers going into some of that ground that agencies previously occupied and offering value-added services in a way they never used to, because the old days of, well, there's an ad, buy it, and our job is done, it's now more about let's help you understand the consumer, let's prepare content for you, let's help you in that stage.
If you're a savvy marketer now and you have the ability to be able to own a transaction, so just take it retailers, there is no point you going to an agency, I feel, for anything about maybe some strategic advice on innovation. But you need to own performance. You need to own that in-house. And so the role of agencies is massively under threat, apart from the exponential growth of the platforms themselves and teaching you how to be able to innovate on those. It's much more strategic consultancy than it is actual access. And so I see the opportunity for publishers and for clients to come much closer together, because I think clients will own more of that because it's fundamental for their business.
So I have to say, from a purely selfish point of view, I'm absolutely loving this conversation. I think what we're saying is, if we have three actors, at one end of the scale you've got the brand owner, in the middle you've got the agency, and the other end you've got the media owner, we're actually all right. It's the agencies that should be terrified. So there should be a conference somewhere in an alternate universe where the agencies are all worrying about being doomed.
I wouldn't say that publishers are going to be all right.
Ah, right. Okay.
I would say we're going to be okay. I would actually challenge a little bit of what you said in the kind of the purchase journey, or from the consumer. The brand awareness piece is actually where the premium content publishers or creators have really owned that top of the funnel space. But actually what a lot of research is starting to emerge is how much influence that the premium content owners married with marketing own or influence that last click attribution that you talk about. Because without the top and the middle of that brand awareness, because it is matched with massive reach, okay? Because that reach has to be delivered with some piece of content, right? That they're owning this space also, or influencing it to a great deal. But I agree with you in the sense that the agencies are challenged, and challenged in the sense with the rise in the sophistication of data and the productization of that data, that it really does challenge the intermediary role that they play, okay? And that's changing, but quite frankly, they've also been largely complicit in the inertia of the media business, and this whole Google, Facebook, we're a tech platform, and all of a sudden, boom, we're owning 75 cents of every new dollar that's spent from a marketer. They really need to take their position and talk about what is the value of what they have been recommending, and is it really delivering a business solution to the marketers, because it's really being challenged right now.
So my counter to that will be that...
This is fun.
Will be that my worry for publishers is that the brands will not just disintermediate the agencies, but disintermediate the publishers themselves. And whilst there is always going to be content that cannot be produced directly by a brand, there is a lot of push from brands to be able to own the relationship directly. And the reasoning behind that, I feel...
Own the relationship with the consumer.
Yeah, exactly. The reason for that is so that they can have a fully unfragmented, single customer view of where their customers are journeying and how they're getting there, because they're not getting that today. And they're certainly not getting it from Facebook and Google.
No, I agree with that, but in your vision of that future, what content are they marrying their content
And that is
with,
the crucial point. And I
message?
want to bring you in here, James, because I, like many people, I'm slightly cynical about whether I ever would want to necessarily read content about beans from Unilever or washing powder from P&G. Am I going to read that? And I know I'm reducing that to an absurd level. What role should those brand owners have in creating content, and can we create content that is superior? I think the answer is yes.
I absolutely believe so, and I think we've touched on a few subjects already here. One of those being how we diversify as businesses, and I think that, you know, within Hearst, and I'm sure we're not alone, we have a burgeoning business around contract publishing, and recognising that in the UK, 600 fabulous storytellers, you know, we don't only have to create content for our own brands, but we can create content for any number of different brands. So, and we're also extraordinarily good at distributing that content, okay, because we've had many, many years of experience of it.
Both through digital and through print and through everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Increasingly social and digital, of course,
Yeah.
and via video as well. So we're developing very aggressively into essentially a marketing services business, where of course we can sell display pages in print and digital, but we can also help with custom publishing, licensing, experiential, because we have a big events business, which has spun out of our brands but doesn't need to be constrained by our brands. So this is a sort of a shifting, if you like, emphasis. We're never saying, I don't think we'll ever say that publishing isn't core to what we do, but the way that we can build our business into different areas is quite interesting and stimulating. And it's not despite or otherwise, away from the digital platforms. We'll work with the digital platforms to rocket fuel that.
And a very quick response to that. If you're moving into creating content for brands, is that as profitable? Is that as large a business as the business of selling them advertising and putting their advertising next to our content?
It isn't yet, but it could be. I mean, it could be. And what's interesting is these massive tech platforms are essentially utilities. So I sort of see them as the telephone. Facebook is the telephone line, and we provide a conversation to run across it. Now, of course, UGC is important. I was talking to Ross about this earlier. For Facebook users, what their mate's doing and what their cat's doing falling off a skateboard is actually quite interesting, perhaps, right? But it isn't professionally produced. And you touched on it earlier, Mike. Some of the concerns that are starting to come very much to the fore for marketers, and it's been so well articulated by Mark Pritchard, who, as everyone here will know, head of P&G marketing globally. He's taking that challenge back to these platforms around fake news, around fraud, essentially, that is operating in that space, in the tech stack space. And I think P&G took $100 million of advertising away from the digital platforms in the last 3 months in the US, and they haven't seen a single downturn in their sales. So this is still a relatively new market. It's very disrupted, but I do believe there's going to be a return
I think to your point
trust.
Is that we're really, it seems like, acquiescing to the technical capability of, to use your word, of these platforms, and not talking about the power of this content. I can speak on behalf of my own company, whether it is the upcoming Olympics that is going to reach over 100 million people in the US over 17 days, or one of many of our new shows that is just premiering in the last couple of weeks. The new season just started for a program that some of you may be familiar with called This Is Us, is reaching 15 million people a week, that is supported by being distributed certain portions of that on Facebook or YouTube. But there is a long waiting line for advertisers to get attached to that show, and not the other way around, because the power of this content to spark a social conversation or to be in the zeitgeist of every conversation cannot be replicated by anything of what we've been talking about here. Mm-hmm. To bring together or spark a conversation of a community or a nation, quite frankly, is only done in this way of this professionally produced or premium content. So we feel pretty bullish on the continuation of the power of that content. It might just be in a different way and using these platforms as distribution, but certainly not changing the core, because there's nothing that is more powerful than that. No marketer, whether it's Mark Pritchard, is going to disagree with that.
Absolutely. I would completely agree. And Ross, earlier on, I suggested that, but content generated by brands, is that going to be great? The truth is that we know that some brands are actually very good at creating content, and as we heard a moment ago, they can hire companies like ours to do it for them, in which case that leaves us as basically content generators on behalf of someone else rather than media brand owners. In your view, what should... Or as well as. What should media owners be doing? Let's call them magazine brand media owners, if you like, for the purposes of this Congress. What should they be doing to thrive in this world? Because you've said it is a dangerous world.
Yeah. My view would be to address their legacy issues. Number one is I don't think that they are as close to their end consumers, or indeed to their client problems from the marketers in any shape or format. I think that they've just got into a rut of doing something in a particular way, and anything breaking out of that, and anything of trying to sell anything more than an MPU, is too much of an ask. And so, I think they could do a lot of things. They could cut out 3/4 of the advertising that appears on all their properties, create scarcity, create viewability, create trust directly, not put everything into a programmatic mix which will just bring down the value of that inventory to say. They can start to solve client problems, which is not about buying an MPU, but it's about solving a distribution problem or a direct, stocking it in the store problem or whatever it will be, which has been traditionally where the agencies have had that interpretation point. And they can most of all understand their customers better, because they see them just as numbers a lot of the time. And behind every one of those numbers is a person. And go back to the point about being mindful of people and how you engage with them and why you engage with them is fundamental to understand the customer better, because then they can start to solve the customer's problem as well. And that's all we're doing is bring, all these are just vehicles which take something which solves a customer problem, and I want to be attached to that, in terms of marketing to them. That's all we're doing. And if we don't understand the customer problems or the client problems, then we've got no right in this world. Facebook, Google, anybody.
So it sounds to me, sorry.
I would come back on that a little bit, Ross, and just say that, these brands have, that they have editors who know their audiences absolutely inside out. And the reason that trust is at such a, there's obviously a complete trust breakdown, just generally and globally. And the Endelman analysis, which is an annual review of trust, is at an all-time low. That's trust of politicians, trust of advertisers, trust of pretty much anything. What magazines do is offer an incredibly trusted media experience. And not just and it's been built up over very many years, but it's because, and specifically because, those editors and journalists are writing specifically for their readers. And there was a piece of research done recently by Magnetic, which is the B2B marketing bureau for the magazine industry in the UK, which is with Mediacom, the world's biggest agency, which actually found that advertising in magazines increased brands' trust quotients or metrics by 64 to 94%, which is extraordinary. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens because there is a halo effect associated with the relationship.
Does that happen in digital?
Digital is very different because I agree with you on that.
That's what we're talking about. We're talking about digital in terms of the Google and Facebook here.
But there is.
But if you want to talk about the breakdown of trust, I think you should talk about.
But Ross,
Google
those
are going to cut across you slightly because we're so sadly time is massively against us.
I'd say those brands still resonate in digital though. It's different, and because of economic challenges, we're obviously pursuing a slightly different model. But the brands resonate. So Cosmopolitan is the biggest Snapchat Discover brand in the UK. And that's that for a reason, because we're super serving millennial women, which is exactly what that audience is looking for.
So if we can pick a common thread out of all of this, it's that it sounds to me as though we need to change the terms of the conversation, that we've allowed the conversation to become one about mass marketing, enormous statistics, colossal amounts of data that actually ultimately just means that 1 billion people saw something, but we have no idea how they reacted to it or whether it was effective or what they, we've allowed those terms to be set by the owners of commoditized reach media. What we need to do as an industry, perhaps, is retake that ground and start promoting the idea of premium as something very different and a different set of metrics for measuring how people respond. Now, in a moment, I want to come back and ask you the question we always ask on these panels, your 10-second piece of advice. Just before we do, this is the kind of debate that people like to get involved in. Again, time is slightly against us, but we've got time for maybe one question. So if you've got a burning question for this panel, and that was a very fast reaction, so I think you deserve the green cube of power before anyone else. Just tell us who you are, please, and give us your question.
Hi. This is a question for you, Linda.
I know we saw you yesterday. Would you mind reminding the audience who you are?
Sorry.
And speak into it. Yeah.
I'm Kali, and I work with the India Today group. Liz, you said earlier that you were still trying to work out an equation with Facebook, but you had worked out quite a good equation with YouTube. If you could you detail out or explain a little bit what that is and how you did it?
Well, it took quite some time, but we figured out a way to work out an arrangement where we're able to distribute a large share or large portion of NBC Universal's content, which is in a variety of clip form, and share the revenue. So we have a revenue partnership with them, but also for some of our top key programs, if you're familiar with any of them, a lot of our late night shows, The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon or Saturday Night Live, I'm sure that most of you are aware of. That is something that we keep and maintain available for distribution and sales rights. So YouTube got enough of what they want from scale so they can serve their audiences more of a general way, and NBC Universal got to carve out a lot of our top tier content vehicles that we actually position to our marketers on a converged basis. So if you want to partner with it on linear television, you can also follow it wherever we socially distribute that content. And that's how we figured out a nice balance between the two.
And I'm sure there are plenty more questions. Sadly, as I said, time is against us. So I'm going to ask you now to give you the very simple task of solving the problems of everybody in the room in a 10-second quote. What should we all do when we leave this building to make ourselves better equipped to survive in this new era? And Ross, I'm going to start with you.
Focus on the areas of the customer journey that are up for grabs. Purchase intent, consideration, behavioral change, that you have the ability to be able to do that. And look to diversify revenue streams away from pure advertising and into performance, lead generation, other aspects of things by solving client problems.
Linda?
I think a good follow-up to that would be, especially if you're a marketer, pay attention and go way beyond the algorithm, because the algorithm isn't going to purchase your product. So make sure you're partnering with the right people.
And James?
Yeah, well, again, building on that, I'd say transform your business for digital, innovate, transform your business processes and your culture, and diversify revenues into very exciting areas that play to the brand strengths.
So really interesting conclusions from all of you. We've talked about the need to emphasize the effect of premium content at a much earlier stage in the buyer journey than simply that last click attribution that is owned by other platforms. We've heard about the need to emphasize research on our terms so we can stress what matters to us and not simply to accept the views of the owners of certain media. And we've heard very specifically about the need to reassess everything we do in the light of this need to think completely differently about the sort of content that works, and as Ross said, to move up the customer journey to the top and emphasize that. It's been a great panel. Thank you. And I'm just sorry we didn't have more time. So can I ask everyone please to thank the panel?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. So, guys, we've now got another of those 5-minute walk-around jobs where you can stay here if you're interested in native advertising in magazine media. You can go to the specialist stage for content for the voice-activated world. Actually, I'd quite like to see that, but I have to be here. And you can go to the Insight Theatre for how diversity contributes to business success. See you in a few minutes.